Hello, everyone, and welcome to the season preview of the All in Football Fantasy Premier League Show podcast. I'm your host, the FPL guru, self-proclaimed Alex Rex, and joining me today are my usual suspects of Tom Hughes and Scott Williams. Welcome back, boys. Are we excited about the new season?
Excited, nervous, curious actually why I'm not the guru, because I think I finished higher than you last year, Alex, unless I'm wrong there.
Didn't Scott say that last year and then finish bottom of us three the year after? So, hey, watch this. It's a big fall, Tom. It's a big fall. Scott, how you doing?
Not bad, mate. Not bad. Looking forward to having Premier League football back. Should be good. Trying to keep a bit more of a closer eye on pre-season than last year. It's all about getting that good start. Mm-hmm. So yeah, all good, mate. All good.
Excellent stuff. Well, thank you ever so much for everyone who's tuning in. Don't forget to follow us on our socials, All in Football P and All in Football Pod on Twitter, Instagram and TikTok. I've been trying to do a lot more posting on those, so well worth giving us the follow. And don't forget to like the video and also subscribe to the channel and subscribe to all the way you get your podcasts from. It really helps boost the channel. First of all, if you're listening to this, join our mini league. And I've reset it. We've had a few new people join us from the Twitter community, which has been really great. So thank you very much for all the interactions I've had. But the league code for the podcast listeners is LXAYMI. That's LXAYMI. There is a post out on Twitter and also on Instagram about joining our league anyway. So the code is on there. So if anyone's interacting with us, then that's great. I think everyone's really enjoyed the shout outs that you get, and also the fact that this is the reviews we do after at the end of the season are quite heavily based on our mini league. So it's great to always get involved. So thank you ever so much for that. And I have to start off by saying as well, thank you to all the accounts that I've stolen stuff from for this show, because I've done a hell of a lot of research for this. So thank you very much to Lego Mane, Ben Krellin, Holly Shand, all great people to follow on Twitter if you want. And then also, if you want to have a look at FPL Focal, he does some really good work on YouTube, some really good short videos. And I've taken some stuff as well from the Planet FPL podcasts. They do some amazing work pre-season. They have a week called Correspondence Week, where they have an expert from every single Premier League club do a 50-minute podcast with them on it. It's well worth listening to those. I've tried to get through as many as I can do, but they're always really good quality as well. And a big shout out to the Lionesses, because football came home yesterday. That was great news. And Scotty, for the podcast listeners, he's wearing his England kit. So thank you very much for representing. Tom's still obsessed about Leeds. He doesn't care about the other football, I'm afraid. I'm sure you watched it. So let's get into the nitty gritty. Did you watch it? Let's get into the nitty gritty, shall we? So Ben Krellin has done a fantastic graphic to look at the season overview, because there is something very, very different happening this season that doesn't normally happen. So let's get into the one rule change or one chip change that's happened for this season, which is the World Cup being included. And during the time that the World Cup happens, you get unlimited transfers. So in essence, it's like you've got 3 wildcards this year. That's the real difference maker. Your first wildcard needs to be used up before the game week 16 deadline. Then you have unlimited transfers during the World Cup. And then your next wildcard has to last you longer than it normally does, because it normally comes in about 18, 19 generally. It has to last you from game week 17 all the way to game week 38. So this is the key rule change. And I'll let you boys digest that. But what's tended to be the consensus within the community is that we're going to see quite a lot more early wildcards this year, because you have basically another one that you can use at game week 17, that you wouldn't normally have to be able to use. And prime time for using it seems to be somewhere between game week 5 to potentially game week 9, because there's an international break between game week 8 and game week 9. So when we're piecing together the early season stuff, and when we're looking at the early fixtures, when we're looking at who we're going to pick in our initial drafts, generally speaking, we're going to be looking at the first 8 game weeks, because I think the optimal time, we looked at this last year, didn't we? We thought that, a wild card, you get the benefit for maybe 5 weeks-ish, ballpark. So if you want to get the maximum benefit from your wild card, you want to be using it about that sort of time, game week 9. I don't know if you boys have even looked at this yet, and if you have, but what's been your take on the additional unlimited transfers during the World Cup?
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. It's just pushing. You want to probably be doing an earlier wild card. I think people won't be as worried if they have shocking starts like I did last year and just ripping a team up in game week 2 or 3, because they know they've got that safety barrier there as well. I think as well, people are not going to be worried as much anyway. I think a lot of people were worried about cancellations because of COVID last year. It just ain't going to happen really this year. So there's going to be less cancellations, less double game weeks on the back of that. So you can be a bit more flamboyant probably with your chip early doors.
That's to do with the rule changes, isn't it? Because there has to, with the COVID cancellations, even if we do get a COVID hit over Christmas like we did before, like you couldn't cancel it as easily because of the rule changes that the Premier League have put in, haven't they? That's one of the big things, even if it does kick back into it as well. Tom, any early thoughts on that? Any early thoughts on strategy potentially?
Similar thoughts, really. I think you got 2 results, haven't you? Start the season well, and it gives you the option to use that wild card earlier than you'd normally. If you start the season well, you probably hold it as long as possible and run as far into Christmas as you could. I think if you start well, it just means that you can use that wild card at a time to maximize the opportunity on runs, which I think you're going to go through later, Alex. And teams that have got good runs, that's where you'd use it if you started well. Like Scott's just said, if you start poorly, you don't need to panic and worry about when you're going to use it. Just use it, get your team sorted after 3 or 4 game weeks, and give yourself a good run with that team, knowing that you've got that extra wild card coming up. So I don't have a strategy yet with it because I think it depends how you start.
I completely agree. Yeah, it depends how you start. But generally speaking, a lot of people get a bit overwhelmed by looking at fixtures and going long terms and runs and all this sort of stuff. Generally, and we did this at the beginning of the season last year, but it's about setting yourself up with a game week 1 team that gives you the flexibility to be able to move on to players very quickly that are doing really, really well. And if there are too many of them and your team's completely rubbish, you actually get the freebie almost this year of being able to use your wild card earlier, which I know when we spoke to Baz last year was his biggest regret, using it in game week 2. But I think if you saw a game week 4 or 5 or 6 wild card this year, it'll have less of a negative impact on your mid-season, because you have another wild card mid-season that you wouldn't normally have done because you had to use your second wild card last year so late on because of all the cancellations and everything else. Like some people use their wild card game at 37 last year. Like it's just obscene. So I think we'll see a lot more early wild cards. The blanks and doubles, because I did have a question about this. So when do you think the blanks and when do you think the doubles will be this year? What do we need? Because it's been such a massive feature of the last 2 years. So if people have only played FPL properly over the last 2 years, they think there's loads of them. Normally there isn't that many. There's a handful. So the first blank game week shouldn't be until game week 25. It shouldn't be. If all things are equal, because we don't have a Club World Cup this year because Liverpool lost to Real Madrid, didn't they, in the final and stuff. So in game week 25, there's the Carabao Cup final. So there should only be either 2 or 4, 2 blank fixtures or 4 teams with blanks. And then you've got game week 28, which clashes with the FA Cup quarterfinals. So that'll be probably the biggest blank of the year will be game week 28. And then you've got game week 32, which classes with the FA Cup semi-finals, which should be a smaller blank. So those would be the blanks. And then the 3 midweeks are game week 29, 34 and 37. So long story short, your blanks will be 25, 28, 32, and your doubles will be 29, 34, 37. And there are way too many permutations as to which will be the big blanks, the small blanks, whatever, big doubles, small doubles. We don't know. There's too many different things that can happen. But yeah, so that's where it's worthwhile saving your free hits for, your second wild card for, and potentially a bench boost. We won't have a game week like last season, which was 36, which was insane for a bench boost. We won't have one of those again. But again, all that strategy is to come later down the line. Don't blow your chips early. And yeah, that's the season overview. Let's move on to early fixtures. So I've got a graphic here from Lego Mane, which shows I think I like it. It's quite a simple thing to digest. Quite simply, the whites are teams that were in the top 8 last year, home and away. So you can see how many top 8 teams are playing. Sorry, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th. And then the teams in red are the ones that finished in Champions League last year. So you can see here who has the easier and harder fixture runs to start the season. And Man City, Liverpool, Arsenal, even like something like Brentford doesn't have a bad start to the season, but Man City, Liverpool and Arsenal seem to be the big teams that have the best starts to the season. And when I look at the FPL Hub, Fantasy Premier League Hub fixture ticker, again, it just backs it up in terms of first 5, Man City, Arsenal, Liverpool. There's your boys, Tommy. Leeds, 4th.
Champions League, about you, early doors.
I'll say you should be 4th according to the FPL ticker. But that shows quite clearly the teams that are going to do the best. So when we're going to be putting together the draft or looking at my draft later, and we're just going to have a look at players generally, Man City, Arsenal, and Liverpool seem to be the ones that that stand out really quite obviously. I wanted to ask you boys anyway, because I did have a question about this. What's your take on the 5 sub rule? And how do you think, because there's been a lot of talk in the community about how that's going to really heavily affect minutes for players playing full 90s, and it's going to mean that more players are going to come off the bench for obvious reasons. So teams with heavy rotation. But what's your take on it? Because it's been a big talking point.
I actually, at first, I was like, oh, you got to be really careful now when you're going for players from like City, for example, because Pep's going to be rotating them even more. But actually, the fact that they're rotating more does mean that, like you just said, the minutes might be split more evenly. So instead of getting a Phil Foden on or a Mahrez on for like 15, 20 minutes, you might get them for 35. You might get more minutes over more players. So for those kind of like mid-range players at the good teams, maybe you can afford to gamble on them a bit more. I know they might play less, but they also might play more because there's more opportunity for them to be subbed on.
Scotty?
I don't necessarily think we're going to be seeing every team do 4 or 5 subs each game week.
No.
I think you're going to see more teams go 3 subs because they've got that safety net of, you know what, let's do 3 subs, let's try and affect the game. But if worse comes to worse, a player gets injured, we've still got another sub in the back pocket. So I can see the subs, like Tom said, subs being a bit more aggressive. I can see your 3 subs getting at least 25, 30 minutes a game. And then there probably will be your usual last 5 minute subs, but I can still say I think it'll be 3 to 4 subs. I think we'll very rarely see 5 subs at any point.
And it's going to be, we all know it, and whatever they say, it's the case. It's going to benefit the big clubs. And, if you can rotate those amazing options that you've got on the bench a bit more frequently, I think you might, I don't know this, but in my head, you're going to have attacking players with more energy in their legs coming on earlier. So perhaps you get slightly more goals and slightly more returns from those players, but who knows? You don't know until we've gone into it. But definitely at the start of the season, I think Scott's right. They'll take that. I like the way he's thought about that. You'll have managers making early, decisive decisions, knowing that they can fall back if anyone gets injured or anything like that. Later in the season, when that fixture list gets a bit congested, probably becomes quite important, right?
I think as well, I don't think I know, you can only make subs at 3 occasions anyway. We've also got half-time as well to take. So including half-time, that's 4. So there's still only 3 chances to make subs, just like there was anyway. So you're going to see subs. I think you'll see 2 or 3 subs coming on at once more. But yeah, I can't see it being massive. I think what it will do is when you're sweating that player not coming off the bench because your first sub is getting you 10 points going on, that's going to be a bit more of a sweat there this year, which is never fun.
We're going to see a lot more of the use of what's called the talisman theory in FPL. So a lot more, it's like the talisman who gets most of the points or the goals, or the ones that play every week, like the team's captain, for an example, who pretty much plays 90 minutes every week. We're going to see a lot more of those sort of players taking like a key role in fantasy teams, I think, especially when we get to the heavy bits of fixture congestion. So, like Christmas period, like to people like James Ward-Prowse and, those sorts of players, they tend to, and, the ones that you can always rely on. I think it makes it a little bit more difficult with like teams like City, for an example. You talk about ones with the high end levels and the numbers. they're the ones that are going to, someone like KDB is going to be the one to rely on, but you're going to see more like 10-minute appearances or 15-minute appearances from someone like Mahrez during the season. It's going to be, I don't think it'll affect it massively, because even when we had 5 subs before, I think even Klopp only made an average of 3.7. So like I don't think it's going to make a massive difference, but it is just something to bear in mind. And also towards the beginning of the season, teams like City, I mean, the Champions League doesn't actually start until after game week 6. So I think there's quite there's going to be less rotation than we think in those teams anyway at the start of the season. So
I think, do you think, just generally speaking, last year was a good year for defenders anyway, but do you think it means defensive assets are more important because generally speaking, they get rotated less? So does 5 subs mean you'll see more defenders get subbed? Or will it still follow the rule that it's mostly most teams make attacking option changes, right? They don't like to disturb that back line. Either they're keeping a clean sheet or whatever. They just don't disturb that back line. You're not going to change your centre backs most of the time. So does it make those defensive options quite important?
It definitely does for centre halves. So a player like Van Dijk or a player like Diaz or Laporte, if they're going to play all season, like Van Dijk is always in the top 20 players at the end of the year, except for when that year he had a massive injury and Liverpool were rubbish. So like someone like him, it's just difficult because there's too many other Liverpool options outfield. But there are certain players at centre half that I think have become better options because of that. So for example, Conor Cody last year did a great job of being a great option throughout. So yeah, I think it makes centre halves probably a slightly more attractive option throughout. Next up, we're going to talk about the pre-season, because previously, the last pre-season, Tom picked up one of his picks that he never stopped banging on about for however long, which was a guy called Said Benrahma, who basically had 2 good game weeks and then messed about for the rest of the season, but gave him an incredibly good start. So one thing I want to do is recommend this video that I've got just one still of right now on the screen, which is by FPL Focal. Now he was world number 1 in the world at one point last season, was a guy called Oscar, and he's just done a fantastic review of the results from pre-season and who's performed at their best. So instead of going through 14 minutes worth of content, because you can go off and watch that on YouTube yourself, FPL pre-season form players, the final one, 115 or 20 pre-season games it was. Here are the people that have returned the most goals and assists from those pre-season games and what their price is. So at this very moment in time, the person, for podcast listeners, the top few on here, Gabriel Jesus, 7 goals and 1 assist. Almiron, 6 goals and 2 assists. Yes, Almiron. Nketiah, 5 goals and 4 assists. 3 of those were in one game that was behind closed doors against Ipswich on a training ground, but just as a caveat for that. Harry Kane, 5 goals, 1 assist. Wilfried Zaha been on fire, 5 goals and 3 assists. Son, 2 goals, 4 assists. Martinelli, 1 goal, 5 assists. And Nunes, 5 goals. Saka, 4 goals, 1 assist. I did go down this list, but a couple of the cheaper ones as well to note. I was going to say Eric Bailly then. Leon Bailey, 3 goals, 2 assists. And Pedro Neto for 3 goals, 2 assists in terms of cheap options. So there's been some really quite noticeable performances from players that are going to be quite high up our lists in terms of who we're going to be interested in, from premiums to lower end. You had maybe a minute to digest that, lads, and probably the first time you've seen any of that information. Any key takeaways? There's a reason Gabriel Jesus is 70% owned currently in fantasy football, isn't there? But any takeaways from it? Any players on there that you were thinking about having in? Tom, your next Benrahma? Anyone you were considering?
Bailey's in my draft. So
okay.
I think he was a player that got injured really quickly when he came into Villa, wasn't he? And then he's been very stop-start. But he was, great player, at least for the bits that I've seen him, the flashes I've seen of him. I think Villa maybe a bit more settled under Gerrard now. He could do well. So Bailey's in my draft because he's 5 million. He's an enabler. So it's worth taking a gamble on one of those. But looking at that list, I think there's a few that you could take a punt on.
Yeah.
and they'd allow you to get those more expensive options. I mean, Almiron, that's sticking out to me because I think Newcastle do well this year. I know it's only pre-season, but for 5 billion, a great enabler again. It just frees up so much of your money to get those premium players.
Forest at home, Brighton away, then City at home, but Wolves, then Liverpool and Palace. So they've got a really good game week 1, maybe game week 2. But after the first 2 game weeks, they do seem to drop off, which is why he's probably not in a lot of drafts. And also, is he going to play? Don't know, especially if they're looking at like Maddison as a player to sign or whatever else, and how their system works. But Aston Villa, they had some good fixtures to start the season. Bournemouth away, Everton at home, Palace away, West Ham at home. Then it goes Arsenal and Man City, so it's a bit tougher when you're talking about Bailey. Scott, from you?
I think it's important. I think this is a really good bit of information to take away, but it's also important to do a bit of research and see who the goals are against. So if you're bagging 3 against Ipswich behind closed goals on a training ground, it's not particularly pulling up trees, is it? Just having a look now because I was interested by Almiron. He got a couple of goals against Benfica, which fair play. Benfica are a decent team, and then his other returns were against Gateshead. Scunny can beat Gateshead, so don't be getting too giddy with Almiron. Have a look if they've played in pre-season. We know Harry Kane, for instance, for Spurs. He's playing against top tier teams usually in pre-season. There, for me, I'm a Kane. Certainly be going for Harry Kane. Jesus, no surprises up there. It's a couple of these are interesting because I'm looking at this and you're looking at Martinelli or Saka, Bailey or Neto, potentially a Podence. It's one or the other. So I think you're not going to have both in. But for me, I'm looking at that saying I'm going to have Martinelli or Saka. I'm going to have Neto or Bailey. And I think a lot of people will be doing similar. It's how the cookie falls on the first day. I will certainly be keeping an eye. I won't be getting any Man United players, and I wouldn't have thought, but I will be keeping a close eye on how they perform because they started pre-season quite well, didn't they? United, Sancho, Martial, Rashford returning, but yeah, and then it's trying to not get sucked into the Mitrovic hole again, isn't it?
Of course it is. United, Martial 3 goals, 1 assist. Sancho 3 goals, and noticeably we played way worse without Sancho. And Rashford 2 goals, 1 assist. I think Sancho is going to be a mainstay in the United team this year. He's going to be one of our really key players. And yeah, I mean, at the moment in my draft, I do have Bailey and Neto, but I've only got them both because I wanted to go with Kane and Jesus and also go quite big at the back. So I think actually you might end up finding a lot of drafts that have 2 players, and I wouldn't have Neto and Podence because I wouldn't go double Wolves, but like a lot of these drafts might have 2 of these players just simply because of how heavy everyone wants to go at the back. But we'll cover that a little bit later on in terms of the poll I did online. And again, great point, Scott. That's one of the great things about this video. It's well worthwhile having a look because for YouTube watchers, I'm showing you here, it gives you the goals, the results, and then also the returns for more players underneath, but the results and who they're against. So it's important to take that into account.
Who was Zaha playing? Because he's always somebody that you just always want to put in, and he's always never returning quite enough. But seeing those, you're just like, if he had a good season under what's the name, Vieira, then could do really well. I mean,
I don't know who they were specifically, so I mean Scott might be looking at that now, but they did have they split the squad in 2. I know Palace did, and they had I think 9 games across the board. I don't know which ones of these Zaha played in and who he scored against, but Montpellier 4-2, QPR 3-0. They drew with Leeds. They beat Gillingham 3-2. They lost to Man United 3-1. They beat Ipswich 4-2. They lost to Liverpool 2-0. They beat Millwall 5-4 and drew 1 with Accrington. So the bigger teams that they played, they did lose against.
Yeah.
And
his returns, Montpellier, QPR, and Gillingham. So again, we're not getting too excited. When he's played against Leeds, he's played against Man United in pre-season. He's played against Liverpool, I believe, in pre-season. He's not returned against the bigger teams. So it's one to not get maybe too giddy about early doors.
I think that's why everyone's getting quite excited about him, because he changed the game against United. They were 2-0 down, they made it 2-2, and he got a goal and an assist. And he impressed in the game after that. I think he got another goal.
Yeah.
So he's the sort of player from pre-season that everything kind of fits together in quite nicely. And also, we've seen how explosive he can be in the league. You know, we've seen it before. He can deliver good results. He can, when he comes on the pitch, he stays fit.
He started the season really well, and then he got injured. Again, just looking at pre-season, and I know it doesn't say he scored against Wednesday night, which is fantastic. But again, only playing maximum of 45 minutes in those games, so
okay,
it's a risk.
He could end up being a player that comes on in the second half of game week 1, rather than being a player that starts.
It could also just be pre-season. You know, it's hard to say how many minutes a player is going to get, I think, based on pre-season, because you can be balancing all sort of things. He could have niggles, it could be fitness. So I get what you're saying, but I suppose you have to see after week 1 or 2. But the point is with a 5 mil player is if he doesn't start, he shouldn't be. Bailey's not my first option. He's my supplementary option. If my 4 main midfielders don't play, then Bailey comes on.
I think that's going to be the difficulty, because the balance of teams is really hard this year, because people want to go bigger at the back because they did really well last year, even though we've got to remember, probably a good time to make this point anyway, that the only 2 defenders that have been in the top 20 players every season for the past 5 years are Trent and Robbo. So they're the only 2 that are really that consistent. Cancelo obviously is his second season in the Premier League. He was kind of nowhere in the first year and did really well in the second. So, you know, maybe he's an exception on that one. But generally speaking, everyone goes, the value comes from the points per million that they achieve. Well, there was a really good graphic I saw on Twitter. Actually, the points per million still, even at the point where everyone goes, defenders are so cheap, the points per million, the best value always still comes from midfielders. Always. Like, even if it's only just by that little bit, even last season, it was just midfielders still, the good mid-price value ones. So, and that's what we talked about on the podcast, the game week 1 last season podcast, was most of your transfers during a year take place between that 5.5 and 8.5 million midfielder bit, because those are the ones that go in and out of form, and they're the ones that are the most explosive. And I think a lot of us now are really trying to find that balance between, right, we all want to go Trent. Not everyone wants to go Robbo, because some people want to go Salah and Diaz, but everyone really wants to go, like, let's just say generically, Trent, Robbo, Cancelo, and then everyone's like, well, Perisic looks great. But James looks great. But Chilwell's back. He had the best points per game of everyone last season. But Doherty's a bit better value. Walker's 5 million. And then everyone just starts getting really excited about all these defenders that aren't 4.5 million. And normally, in the past, other than last year, every season, this is something that people who've only properly played it last year really will have noticed. But every season before then, it's been all about who are the best value cheap defenders and how early can you get on them. And then, or you pile all your money into midfield and then all your money into strikers. And that's what you did, because that's where you got the most points. Because usually every season there was 1 or 2 defenders that were in the top, like Trent and Robbo. Like, everyone just went Trent and Robbo, and then 3-4 millions that played, because they still offered the same amount of value. I think that's an interesting time to move on to the best transfers in for the season. And I'll take this from another angle, because I know we talked about this previously, but obviously a few teams this year have made some really big signings. You know, Erling Haaland obviously to Man City, Darwin Núñez to Liverpool, and last season there was just no value in strikers at all, was there? Like, really? Like, no. It was an absolute shower. We were doubling up on King and Dennis, for God's sake. Like, it was the worst season strikers ever. And again, a lot of people who've only really played last year will go, strikers are rubbish. Don't want any strikers. Generally speaking, for all of the seasons before that, some of them have been essential. So you'll remember, like, Patrick Bamford from the year before, when he was like 6 million to start the season. End of the year at like 7.5 or something. He was essential. He was such good value, and he was scoring all the time for Leeds. Like, Raul Jimenez has been that way before. Calvert-Lewin at the beginning of the season before last, when James Rodriguez was playing with him and giving him loads of assists. Ollie Watkins even that season. Danny Ings the year before when he was at Southampton. There is a lot of value in strikers. And I think it just comes from recognising it early when there is or there isn't, and then being able to jump on them, which is why flexibility is key. So don't get set in your ways with recency bias that big at the back's everything and strikers are rubbish, because that's literally just how last season has. Every season before that, that's not how it's gone. Maybe that's changing styles for teams, whatever. But don't then get stuck in what I did last season. I didn't move to big at the back fast enough. If it looks like strikers are doing really well, you've got to get on the strikers early and sack off Cancelo. And that's going to be difficult for people who haven't really played a lot. But boys, talk to me about the who do you think's done the best business then? Obviously, we talked about some big strikers. Who do you think's done the best business so far in the transfer window?
For me, I like Newcastle signings. I think they're very astute signings based on the fact that they've got all this money now, and loads of people thought, they were going to go out and buy Mbappe and all of this, blah, blah, blah. But actually, they've shown that they're just, making very sensible signings for sensible amounts of money. Nick Pope, Botman. If they get Maddison from Leicester, that for me, that's not going out with no plan at all. That is 3 really solid signings, and actually all of those players will improve that team. They were good at defensively in the second half of the season anyway, from what I can remember. So Pope, Botman, really good signings, make them even more solid at the back. Maddison, give them that extra spark. So I'd probably say Newcastle if they get Maddison done.
Sky?
I can't look past Spurs. I've been really impressed.
Go on. Yeah.
Someone messaging in. Perisic on a free is a great bit of business. He's played under Conte at Milan already. He's going to be an exciting prospect from that left wing back position. I think he's going to get lots of assists this season, I must say. Basuma, just not really from a fantasy perspective, but as a football team perspective, is a great bit of business. Longley, great centre back, fast. Jed Spence, be interesting to see if he can break into the team. Absolutely fantastic season in a really stylish Forest team this year. Fraser Forster, backup keeper, decent, and then Richarlison. Very excited to see what happens there.
How do you think he will fit in? Do you think he's going? Do you think this has ruined Kulusevski as a fantasy asset? Do you think he's going to be part of the front 3, or is he going to be the guy that rotates across? What do you think?
He's going to be starting Kulusevski, isn't he? Because Richarlison's banned first game of the season. He got that red card at the back end of last season, so he's going to be starting. Yeah, he's going to be. That's it. He got banned for that, didn't he? He's going to be starting the season anyway. I think for £60 million, he's going to be hard to leave him on the bench. He's a proven goal scorer in the Premier League. I think he's brilliant. I think he adds a bit of bite to sometimes maybe a bit of a soft Spurs team, along with Basuma as well. I'm really, really looking forward to that. See how they all connect, because if Kulusevski doesn't get going in that, and Son, Richarlison, and Kane are firing, that's a frightening front 3 for me.
Yeah, I'm gutted United didn't sign Basuma, to be honest. I think he was the perfect player for United, but not in the Champions League, and he could play Champions League football at Spurs. So why would he come to United? To be fair, Tom, Leeds' business. How do you rank your chances for this season? Because I know we've got a lot of Leeds fans listening to this podcast. What's your take on Marsh Ball and what he's delivering?
I don't know. It's the honest answer. Because that's just me being honest. Because at the end of last season, all he was trying to do was motivate the players, make us a bit more solid at the back. The attacking football, like the speed at which we went from Bielsa ball to not being able to string 2 passes together was unbelievable. It was like it was the opposite of when Bielsa came in. You could see that those coaching methods were gone. I'm not criticising Marsh here, by the way, because it's a total rip-up. Only Bielsa can coach in that way. But we've got loads of new signings. How are they going to gel? How are they going to work? It's a new strategy. I don't know is a simple answer. I'd say if I'm looking at the players that maybe might do all right, Aronson does look really good. I think he'll do well. And he's a pretty cheap option. I think he's like 6 million. Rodrigo's going to play. And he'll be 6 million up top. So if you're going for a cheaper front option, Rodrigo could be an option. He got a pretty dodgy hat trick against Calgary on Sunday, but I wouldn't read too much into that. So I don't know. Bamford looks on it as well, and that's the other thing with Bamford is he's got England in his sights. Very big stretch that he'd have to have an unbelievable start to the season. But yeah, I don't know. I'm not going to be rushing to have 3 Leeds players in. Let's put it that way.
Massive first 6 games. Wolves, Southampton, Chelsea, Brighton, Everton, Brentford. Massive. It's so, I mean, any teams that lose the 2 best players and then bring in 5 unknown players that have never played in the Premier League before. Wow. It's like, so I agree with Tom. No idea what to expect.
I agree entirely.
We've got probably, I would be shocked if we don't make 2 more signings by the time the window shuts. Probably a striker and a left back. So
fair enough. I don't blame you either. So one of the guys to follow online on Twitter who does just a couple of nice graphics, this guy called Lego Marnie, who I mentioned earlier. And this is a graphic on screen for all of you podcast listeners, which basically just gives ideas of good streaks for teams, because you're bringing in a player for a transfer, you're bringing them in for more than just 1 game week. You need to bring them in for 4-6, can't even count. Good luck, my kids, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 game weeks. That's what you want to bring them in for. So from the for the YouTube watchers, you can see on screen that Manchester City have got a fantastic run from game week 2 to 6, and then they've got a game against Spurs at home, then Wolves, then Man United and Southampton. So they've got a really good run of fixtures, as you'd expect. Liverpool as well. They've got 6 of their first 7 fixtures are really good, and the only one that isn't is Man United away, and they battered us twice last year, so I don't think that's a bad fixture at all. I wouldn't mind tripling up on. I'm going to be tripled up on Liverpool to play Man United, because I still don't trust us, especially not to score against a team like Liverpool. But it gives you a really good idea on here about who has some really good starts to invest in, and also kind of when the fixtures turn and change for other teams, and when you're looking at wildcarding. So, for example, see from game week 9 here that Chelsea's have a good run from being Chelsea's fixtures are amazing, by the way. And if you get the chance to see, actually just have a quick look at them. All their away games are pretty easy, and all the home ones are pretty hard. Like the home fixtures are Spurs, Leicester, West Ham, Liverpool, Wolves, Man United, and Arsenal before the World Cup. It's pretty hard. And then their away games are all pretty easy, but it shows a really good turn in fixtures. West Ham around game week 7, Leicester around game week 9. So all these teams here have, good turns fixtures, but Leicester actually only have 1 bad fixture from game week 6 to game week 13. So, maybe wait and see at the start of the season for Leicester, and then see who's playing and try to get on those assets. Players like Maddison, if he's still there, players like maybe Barnes, if he's on form, because you know what he's like. So it gives a really good idea about who has good runs and who doesn't. So to start the season, obviously, we can see there Man City, Liverpool, Chelsea are on and off, hit and miss. Bit of a gamble, I think, with what's going on at Chelsea, personally. Don't get me wrong, I'm Raheem Sterling's biggest critic, but I think he'll still be their top scorer this year, and I think he'll be their top scorer in fantasy asset. See how he gets on. Spurs, again, decent start. Arsenal, decent start. So, yeah, I think it just gives a good idea about different runs and different streaks. Brentford have a decent one. And to link that in to the Captaincy Matrix. So Holly Shan did a really good Captaincy Matrix just for the first 8 game weeks. And a lot of our premium assets we'll be looking at here will be between Spurs, Liverpool and Man City. Basically, Salah, Kane or Son, KDB or Haaland. Those 5 players, generally speaking, across the board. And it looks like game weeks 1, 2, 4, 6 and 7, maybe even 5, all fit really quite nicely for Liverpool. Salah could be captain in pretty much any game of the first 7. Spurs have 4 really good fixtures, 1, 3, 4 and 6. But as you can see, the Manchester City rotation with Spurs and also with Liverpool looks really good. The only clash maybe is game week 5. I can't remember who they're playing game week 5, Spurs. Might be United or something, but their fixture didn't look so good. So you can see here that you want to probably either be pairing a Liverpool player with a City player for captaincy, or a Spurs player with a City player for captaincy. It's which is quite difficult. I mean, you can go Spurs and Liverpool, which is how I'm set up at this very moment in time, but it's just you'd be doing Salah at home against Newcastle. But if you're comfortable with that, it's okay. But it just gives you a really good idea about game weeks to captain. So it looks like it's going to be Salah against Son or Kane game week 1, and it's going to be Salah against Haaland or KDB game week 2. And then the best fixture looks again to be either Son or Kane, but in game week 3. But any take on this, guys, in terms of Captaincy Matrix? Any thoughts on your premiums and who you'd be looking at captaining? Have you?
I'm just looking at game week 3 and thinking that'll be Salah triple captain for me, probably.
I hate you so much, though.
based on past history, you know.
We've got Ten Hag now at the helm. Don't you worry.
My only thing would be I've learned this the hard way is captain rotation. You know, sometimes going with the fixtures isn't the way. So I'm more interested to see which of these premium assets starts well, and then they'll probably be my set and forget captain. Because if you captain Salah or for every game last year, on average, you're going to do better than rotating, unless you get it perfectly right with your captain selections.
Just keep an eye on those early kickoffs. They do not return. I looked at them last year. They do not return those early kickoffs. So Fulham, first game against Liverpool, 12:30 on Saturday.
Yeah. Okay.
It isn't the first game that weekend though. That's the only thing. I've got the Friday game, so that makes me feel a little bit more comfortable about it. It's always horrible when it's an early kickoff and it's your first game. Like that's painful when that goes wrong.
I'm going to triple captain Jesus, try and get top of the leaderboard on the Friday.
Oh, get the triple captain used early. What was the early kickoff on the first game of the season last year?
Leeds Man U on it.
Yeah.
Yep, that was ridiculous.
When
we went through him, that was the only anomaly. Every other one was 2 goals in it. That was a freak game.
Yeah, it was a free game, to be fair. And it was a very odd one, but I just thought I'd remind Tom of that one.
Yes.
We spent £1 billion. Well, good for you.
Pogba got 4 assists in that game, didn't he?
I know. Goodbye, good riddance to that.
Yeah, get rid of him. He's ridiculous.
Pogmentary, 2 stars, I think it was on Amazon Prime, for a reason. Not worth any. 290 grand a week. Jeez. Anyway, I'm not going to get on my rant about Paul Pogba. So let's get on to questions. Let's go to questions. Let's go on to building a team, building a draft. Let's get on to having a look at players per position and really piecing together who we're going to look for to put in our game week 1 teams. And I'll try and answer some of your questions that you've thrown in along the way here with responses. One of the big changes in Fantasy Premier League this year is there are no 6 million keepers anymore. And I think that's a fantastic move. It's really brought some of these players back into play. Alisson, very difficult to fit in your team at any point, really, unless you wanted to go like Trent and Salah and Alisson maybe, and not go Robbo. But, the points are... Alisson 176 points last year. So I can't remember what Robertson got, but it wasn't much more than that if it was more. So, an option. Hugo Lloris at 5.5 and Edison at 5.5. So out of those 3, I think Edison's probably the one who's going to be top of everyone's list. 5 million keepers. Let's talk about them, shall we? So we have Sarr, Fabianski, Ramsdale, De Gea, Schmeichel, Mendy, Pope and Martinez. So all some interesting options there. But I think we need to look at the 4.5s as well. So the 4.5 million options that rotate well are 4.5 million options. The teams that rotate well defensively are either Arsenal or Brentford, rotate quite well with Newcastle, but I don't think you're going to rotate Ramsdale or Pope with Raya because you can just get Edison and a 4 million keeper and it costs the same amount of money, which is one of the great things about the reduction in prices. You can go Palace and Leeds. They rotate relatively well. So you could go with Gaeta and Meslier, because Butland apparently is either injured or he's gone. I don't know what Butland was that. But is he injured? Is that what that is? A 25% chance for a hand injury. So it looks like Gaeta's going to be there. Have they signed anyone else in goal yet, Palace? Because they were looking at keepers, weren't they? Was it Sam Johnston? Has he gone there?
He's not gone there. He's gone somewhere else in the Prem.
Okay, fine. So I knew they were looking at Johnston at one point. So Gaeta and Meslier potentially. And then you've got Leicester with Wolves or West Ham or Brighton. But again, that's a 5 million keeper with a 4.5.
Apologies, Sam Johnson has gone to Palace.
So there's a rotation risk of Johnston and Gaeta versus Meslier. So there's not really 2 good 4.5s that work well together. which has ended up me thinking, right, I either go with a 5 million keeper and a 4 million keeper and just stick with the 5 mil, or I go for Edison at 5.5. So I love the way that they've changed the prices. It's really brought the premium keepers back into our consideration. Your thoughts on goalkeepers, lads? Won't make this one too long, but your thoughts on keepers?
Yeah, Edison and cheap. Probably Edison and whoever's number 2 now at City. I think that's probably the way I'm going at first look there.
You just use an outfield. You just use a City slot though, don't you?
Yeah, ignore that. Edison and someone cheap.
I think for one of the options for cheap is potentially Gazaniga at Fulham, but I think they might be signing Bernd Leno now, aren't they?
I was going to say Leno's going to go to Fulham. He's going to be their number 1, I think, isn't he?
Is he actually going to go? That's a thing. And then Schmeichel's been rumoured to be leaving. I don't know if that was I don't know what's happened there. So maybe put Ward in, 4 million, start the season. I mean, at the end of the day, they're not going to play for you anyway, but you just want to put a 4 million keeper on the bench that's got the best chance of playing possible in case Edison gets COVID or something. You want to try and do your best to do that. Tom, any thoughts on the keepers before we move on to defenders?
Not really. Get Pope in. See if somebody gets a 4.5 like a Ramsdale like last year, but it seems unlikely, so it'll probably be like a Nick Pope for me, and just forget about it and get onto the exciting stuff.
I like it. Defenders. Now, let's talk about defenders. We'll sort these guys out by teams selected by, for the fun of it, to start with. Little bit of a template 5 going on here, by the way. So Trent at 57% owned, Cancelo at 45%, James at 39.7, Perisic at 29.2, Neco Williams 27.1, and then Matty Cash at 20.6. The only other ones that are really in consideration are Trippier at 16.9, and then it's Van Dijk, Zinchenko, Diaz, Robertson, and Vestergaard, who are the only other ones in double figures. So there's a real template for me. Now, I did ask the question about how many premium defenders people were looking at who from our followers on Instagram earlier, and 25% were at 2, 50% were at 3 and 4, and 25% were at 4. And that was at people over 4.5. So basically 4 of our audience were going for Trent, Cancelo, James and Perisic, or Trent, Cancelo, James and Robertson. Really interesting. It's because I think we've actually got a lot of options in here, a lot of combinations, I should say, depending on how many premiums you want to go for. I'm going to go by total points from last season, I think, just to put those at the top. And it just shows here how dominant Liverpool are at the back. Yeah, Robertson 186, and I think Alisson, what did I say, 176 in terms of points. For me, my personal opinion on defenders is that game week 1, we've got the least amount of information we will have the entire season, even after the World Cup. So we've got to kind of go with what's been going on last season, and also the form of those players and how people have been lining up in pre-season. And it seems to me, I mean, in pretty much all my drafts I've put together, pretty much I've gone for a 3 premium, and I've gone Trent, Cancelo and Robertson in pretty much all of my drafts that I've put together. I don't think going like Perisic is wrong. He's finally played a full game at pre-season. He was injured for a lot of it before. A lot of people have been questioning Doherty as an option at 5 million. I'm not so sure, but personally, I think he's still potentially an option. Put these at price now because it's easy to have a look at, isn't it? For me, Van Dijk is always not an option, which is a shame because he should be, but you're not going to use up an outfield position on Van Dijk. Chilwell, they're looking at signing at Cucurella now, aren't they? And Chilwell played in the B team 45 minutes for Chelsea in the last pre-season games. Chilwell's out for me. Matip is, again, not going to be an option. And then it's just who you want to invest in terms of City. So we can have a look at Man City defenders. Kyle Walker's down here at 5 million. They don't have any other wing backs. You know, he's 5 million quid to get him on the City defence. So we have got a lot of options. I don't really get the Zinchenko bit, by the way. I guess people have banged on about Zinchenko for quite a while as an option who's come from Man City to go to Arsenal, but he's going to play left back, and even if he doesn't play left back, he's going to play holding midfield unless Arteta plays 3 in a midfield. So at 5 million, he's still not really an option for me, especially considering Tierney might be fit for pre-season. But boys, your thoughts currently on defenders? How many premiums are you going to go for at the moment? If you haven't thought about it yet, how many sort of sing at you? What are your thoughts?
I go backwards and forwards with this, to be honest. Is it wrong that actually, I know you're saying Van Dijk's not an option, but he's at 183 points there. So between him and Robertson, I mean, do I feel like Robertson might get rotated a bit more with 5 subs? He might make a Tsimikas for Robertson's substitution a bit more frequently than he did last year. Just so, they're 2-0 up, Robertson comes off the pitch, Tsimikas comes on, just save Robbo's legs. I don't know. But is the 20, there's a 3-point difference and a 0.5 mil saving? I don't know. It's so hard. And then Cancelo, 7 million, yeah, great. But I don't love that opening day fixture away at West Ham, but you can't make a decision based on one fixture, right? I like Perisic. I think that's going to be a good option. I can't see why he wouldn't play most games for Spurs. So I think Perisic is a good option. I don't really like going for Chelsea. I'll be honest, Chilwell and James, I'm going to be avoiding. Not because I don't think they might get attacking returns, but they look like they've had a really shaky pre-season, and I'm not entirely sure what that back line is going to look like with a lot of those key centre-backs going. Rudiger, Christensen, obviously massive losses. So I'll probably be avoiding Chelsea defensive assets. But anything else, I really don't know. I haven't decided yet.
Scotty, and any thoughts on this in terms of value for defenders or people you're thinking of who are definitely going to be in your team?
Oh, Trent and Cancelo are definitely going to be in my team. I think they're going to be in a lot of teams. I think it's going to be quite a boring couple of picks. And I'm leaning on Perisic just to mix it up at the minute.
Sorry, Scott. I was just going to say, because you made me think, the other thing by going Perisic is you don't tie yourself into 3 Liverpool assets that you can't get out of.
Yep, that's why I'm probably do that. But then I'll probably end up triple up on Spurs. But I like Nico Williams. We were saying this when earlier. There's a reason he's in there. He's going to play for Forest. I think when he's played for Liverpool, he's actually looked pretty good. Is that philosophy of an attacking fullback? It looks really good for me.
It definitely makes a difference what we're talking about here in terms of, we talked about budget midfielders earlier on, we were reviewing pre-season. How many premium defenders you go at the back directly influences if you're going to have Neto and Bailey, because what you would tend to have is another 7 million midfielder in instead of Cancelo and another £5 million defender. Whereas everyone now is considering the options of, okay, well, do I go 2 premiums, 3 premiums, 4 premiums at the back? And I think I'm edging towards going at least 3 and then getting a 4.5 million option in Nico Williams. And 4.5 million options there's just an absolute bucket load of them. It's really hard to decipher the best one to go for. It looks like Ben White's going to be playing at either right back or centre back. I mean, you never know. He might end up being a really good pick at right back, because Tommy Asu's not going to play on Friday. According to all of our Arsenal sources, it's going to be Ben White at right back with Saliba and Gabriel at centre half. Good start to the season here for Aston Villa. Even someone like Tyrone Mings, again, we were talking about that theory he's going to start every single week at centre back. Everyone who knows me from previous knows how much I love Adam Smith at Bournemouth. You can look at even the sort of Brighton players. The Palace defence still offer a really, really good value. There's so many 4.5 options. I actually really like the Leicester 4.5 options. I'm a big James Justin fan, and he returned some really good points previously. Fofana's going to play most weeks, but I think Justin, with Pereira almost certainly being out with an Achilles injury, and he's pretty much always out, I think James Justin is probably my standout 4.5 million pick at this very moment in time. With his previous. And then Dalot as well for United. Brentford and Brighton first 2 game weeks. I think he's a good option maybe to pair with some better players as well. But I mean, when we look at the defensive rotation, like I said previously, Arsenal and Brentford with Newcastle, obviously Trippier's a very popular option. It's very much time, but he is 5 million. You look at Palace and Leeds. I just wouldn't trust any of the Leeds defensive options at this very moment in time, as I'm sure Tom would back us up. But I do like potentially a Leicester rotation with either a Wolves rotation or a West Ham rotation. So Wolves maybe with Aït-Nouri at left back along with Justin, 2 4.5s, and then Nico Williams. And if you're going to go for 2 premiums, I think that's a good option. And then I think Vladimir Soufal at 4.5 is going slightly under the radar here at 1.4% owned, because he had a pretty poor season last season with injuries. But the season before that, he did fantastically well. I think one of the only problems that we've got is that he starts over Man City. But then you've got to remember, he plays Forest, Brighton, and then Villa in the next 3. So you're not going to play him game week 1. You bench him game week 1. Nico Williams plays Newcastle, so you probably start him instead. Or you would be rotating with someone like Aït-Nouri, who was going to rotate with, against Leeds. So you could rotate with Aït-Nouri. So there are still options out there to go with 2 premiums, 2 4.5s, and then potentially a 4 million. These are all options to do, because then you can put more money into your midfield. So it's going to be the 2 premium defenders for me. And if that is the case, it's going to be Trent and Robbo for me personally, with Ederson in goal. So I've got a piece of the City defence. And then I'll probably be going for something like Aït-Nouri and Justin with Nico Williams. Or I'd be taking Aït-Nouri out and I'd be sticking someone like Cancelo in. But that's where I'm at personally with my current drafts. Any more thoughts on defenders, lads, before we move on to midfielders? Big shake from Scott.
Yeah.
There's a lot going through Tom's mind right now.
Oh, I hate these podcasts, really, to be honest.
It just makes him think too much.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that Scott basically hasn't even done his team yet. That just makes me happy, because he's just sitting there right now, hand across his face for all the podcasts.
It's like he's playing poker, isn't he?
It is. He's got his sunglasses
he's
on.
His poker face. He's not giving anything away.
He's having a really good think about it. So, midfielders. Let's start off by talking about the premiums, shall we? Because this is one of the main topics of conversation with people. Premiums being double-figured players who cost double figures in terms of numbers. So Salah, De Bruyne, Son, Sterling, and Fernandes. Okay, well, we can pretty much rule out Bruno. He's way too expensive compared to you can get into the United team way cheaper. Let's just get rid of him. I've seen a lot of drafts with Sterling in. I just don't really trust Chelsea straight away for obvious reasons. Exactly what you said earlier, Tom. Sterling's kind of out. I personally think Son is probably the best game week 1 captain at home to Southampton. But because of team structure, I'm going to have Kane and not Son, because I want to be able to move around easier to Haaland if he decides he's going to be incredible and not put sitters over the bar and that sort of thing. I want to be able to get on him quickly. I would love De Bruyne. Every draft I put together, there's just too much sacrifice to get him in as well as Salah. I'd have to go no Mo, and my 8 million midfielder would have to be Luis Diaz, really, to be able to get De Bruyne in. But I think De Bruyne will outscore Haaland this year in terms of fantasy points. Personally, that's my shout. But premiums, lads, in your draft you put together, Tom, how many of these big boys did you have in?
I did have one draft where I had 4 of them. I think I had Salah, De Bruyne, Son, and Kane, and the rest of my team was, as you can imagine, absolutely awful. Yeah, but passable. I did look at it and think, do you know what? Actually, an option, but I'm not going to do that. I don't know. Salah. I really want to convince myself to downgrade from Salah to Luis Diaz, because that makes such a difference to who you can put in. But it's going to end up being 100% Salah. You can't get away from it. He's guaranteed to get 200 plus points, no questions asked, unless he has a major injury. So Salah, 100%. I've got Kane for the same reason you said. I had Haaland in originally, but I think Kane's run of fixtures at the start and pre-season form and end of season form last year just all mean I'm going to have Kane in. I do agree with you, Son's a good choice, but Kane, I think he's going to be a really good option this year, so I'm not too bothered about that. Sterling, same as you. Chelsea, not sure. So yeah, and KDB, I'd love to have him, but how'd you get him in?
Just before I come to you, Scotty, on this, the Kane and Son situation. So Son returned more off a lower XGI. So I think his expected goal involvement was like 21.5, and Kane's expected goal involvement was like 25. So even though Son returned more, Kane actually still had more genuinely like easier opportunities. And also people were talking about, is Conte made them play differently, and is Kane not going to have that many chances anymore? Well, he's outscored Son in pre-season. So again, I say Son's the best option, but maybe that's some recency bias from last season. And actually, I'm going to be better off with Kane captain game week 1, but I'm scared of the Salah side of things. But anyway, sorry, Scott, to you.
Yeah, I really don't want to go Salah as well. One of the things that's probably going to make me go Salah is, like you've mentioned earlier, I'm going to go Kane over Haaland, but it's such an easy Kane to Haaland. Whereas if you don't go Salah, you put your money elsewhere, and to get back to Salah, you get rid of Diaz and you got rid of someone else, and you all of a sudden taking -4s really early on. So it is really important to consider that. Right, let me go for the Diaz over Salah, but let me have a plan in place for how I'm going to get back to Salah without ripping the whole team up. So I probably will go Salah if I'm honest. And again, it is what Tom said, proven track record in fantasy. He did score a penalty at the weekend. He looked fairly okay. I really want to go Son. Won't be going Sterling and Fernandez. Jared Bowen, let's not forget how much he ripped it up last season. He was fantastic. And yeah, I'll be staying away from Chelsea assets as well. So yeah, no Mahrez, no Foden, no Gundogan because of rotation. So yeah, it's going to be, I think your premiums are going to be very similar, aren't they?
Apparently, the way Liverpool got round Salah's contract impasse as well, because they haven't broken their wage structure to get him in, get him onto this new contract. But apparently, the way they've done it is through goal-related bonuses. So I know
even less.
Yeah, well, everyone's making a thing that he gave Nunes that penalty pre-season. Bet he's not getting a bonus for it. I wonder if he'd make that same decision on game week 1 against Fulham. I don't think
chance.
So.
He wants Golden Boot. He wants all the awards. So no chance.
It is interesting you say that, Scott, because then the next conversation that we'll have is about like 8.5 to 7.5 million midfielders, or maybe even down as far as 7 million midfielders. The majority of the people on our Twitter poll said that Saka was their number 1 8 million midfielder, and then after that it was Diaz, and it was a bit of either Foden or Mahrez. So I'm assuming they were talking more about Mahrez at this very moment in time. Foden missed most of pre-season. Yeah, I think Jared Bowen, obviously game week 1's a tough fixture, but then the next 3 fixtures after are pretty good, and he's had a decent pre-season as well. Saka, for me, he stands out quite far. So he actually, if we look at the statistics for £8 million midfielders over the season, I think if you compare them all together in a table, he was like second in terms of XGI overall and total points overall. But actually, per start, he was always in the bottom 3 out of all of this lot. So he's consistent. He'll play a lot, and they've got a good number of fixtures. But I think his points per game was like 5 point something, which is all right. It's decent, but he seems to be the number 1 option. Maddison's interested in how the 50 million bid's got him from Newcastle. We'll see, but I think it'll take a lot more than that to get him out at this very moment in time. Luis Diaz, if you're not going to double up at the back for, and obviously if you're not going to go Salah, then Diaz seems like a pretty straightforward option. Personally, I know he looks good and he seems like a really, really good player. He's still a fantasy wait and see for me, like Diaz. I'm still waiting for him to take off as an actual fantasy asset. And I feel like after watching it the weekend, Firmino started, which is great. Then Nunes came on. I feel like it's going to be like Salah, then Nunes, then Diaz in terms of returns. I feel like he's going to be third fiddle. And I hope he's not like the Firmino, but that's my thought. And yeah, I think Kulu's probably not an option for me because of the Richarlison signing, but it probably should be, but I think there's better. So for me, the 8 million options, I like Saka and I like Bowen at 8.5. It's kind of screwed Bowen over there. If he was 8 million, I think it'd be in a hell of a lot more teams than 8.1%. I think that 0.5 really, really put him just that little bit above everybody else. Obviously, it has its 0.5 of everyone else. Great maths out. 7.5's Gundogan's obviously not an option. Sancho, Coutinho, Zaha's always there, isn't he? Harvey Barnes, Grealish, and Bernardo Silva. Bernardo's with De Bruyne in the team never returns anywhere near as much. Thoughts on this sort of 7.5 million bracket then, lads. Grealish has had a lot of positive press, but he's still, for me, he's still a fantasy wait and see. But I understand why people are interested in it. Thoughts?
I don't think you can go too wrong with any of them. That's my thoughts, probably. I think there's a group of them in that banding that probably seem relatively sensible. I think if you go Luis Diaz, if you go Saka, if you go Bowen, I don't think you're going to miss too badly, if that makes sense. I don't think there's any that I'd avoid in there. So I think it's just a case of maybe having a look at which your team balance, and actually, is there a player that you need to get in because you got free from Liverpool, you can't get Diaz, or blah blah blah. So I don't think there's no one that scares me in that list about having in. I think I'd be happy having all of them in.
And that's where a lot of your transfers will take place during the season. You know, on this page again, these are the players that you'll be bringing in and out quite a lot, and you know you'll be spending your 34 free transfers or 33 free transfers you get during the season on them. Sancho, again, he is a wait and see for me. Just Rashford at 6.5 is an extra. He's $1 million cheaper, and it just hurts less if he does rubbish. Even though I think Sancho's the better option. Coutinho, you know what he's like. He's just too hit and miss. But there's some good 6.5s as well. Scotty, your thoughts?
Yeah, just so many options in here. I think it's like I say, it's where your transfers. There's going to be so many watch and sees. Christian Eriksen at Man United, absolutely one to keep an eye on. St. Maxim now a midfielder again, massive to keep an eye on. Odegaard, Trossard, loads of them. This is where these are going to be. It's not so much your premiums, is it? It's these are the big sort of decisions you're going to have. This is where you're going to be. If you move on Eriksen quick and he's bagging for fun and he's getting loads of assists, same with St. Maxim as well. This is where it gets exciting, isn't it? Fantasy football, because let's be honest, we all have the same 2 or 3 or 4 premiums. This is where the game is won. This is when it's exciting. So, loads of options.
Totally agree, and it takes someone to just take a bit of a gamble on Jared Bowen, for example, and to pair him with, let's just say, Rashford and maybe Odegaard playing in a 10 behind Jesus. I mean, Odegaard, I really like to watch him play football. I think he's a great footballer. He's just never been the fantasy asset yet. Maybe this season could be the time, you know, with a proper number 9 in front of him. Maybe he could be the one with, like Partey, Xhaka, Zinchenko, whoever's playing behind. Maybe this could be the time when Odegaard gets a bit more freedom. But anyway, decent options. Ward-Prowse, 6.5 mil, classic. There's loads of here at like 6 mils and so many, like Ziyech 6 mil, Pulisic 6 mil, like none of the Buendia, Fabio Martinelli is one that is somebody who really does stick out though, because he's probably going to start. And Fabio Vieira looks like a good player, but Martinelli is someone who's going to be in a lot of teams. And people probably won't double up too much on Saka and Martinelli, but if they're not going to go Saka as their 8 million option, I think we're going to see a lot of 6 million Martinellis in there. I think he's going to be in a lot of teams, 16.7% at this very moment in time. And yeah, like Rodrigo, like Tom said earlier, 6 mil. Jack Harrison's had a good pre-season as usual. Bruno Guimaraes, 6 mil, starts at home against Forest, a good option. Jalen's, I mean, don't get me wrong, you know, we start here at 6 mil, Nottingham Forest, Newcastle, West Ham, Everton. It's not the easiest start in the world. They've got Bournemouth, Leeds and Fulham, Villa, Wolves and Brentford, Brighton, sorry. They've got a good run from sort of game week 6. If he takes well to the team, maybe he's an option. But yes, the cheaper options. So if we get to sort of the 5.5s here, Pedro Neto seems to be an incredibly popular option, good pre-season at 19.2. Don't think you go far wrong, to be fair, with Neto. Seems like a good option to start the season with. Fulham and Leeds seems relatively solid. Podence as well as an okay one if you want to go alternative to that. And then Leon Bailey at 5 million seems a good shout. And then if we want to have a look at the 4.5s, because inevitably everyone's going to have a 4.5 in their team this season. They're also, again, players to watch out for. For example, last season we had Jacob Ramsey and Anthony Gordon. You know, they're really good enablers to get into your team quite quickly. The transfer of Andreas Pereira to Fulham, playing in a number 10 role, behind Mitrovic at 4.5 million. There's no wonder there's no one's confused why he's owned by 24.8% of players. So I think in terms of your structure of your team, you're going to end up going with either 2 premiums, or you're going to go with a premium and 8 mil, maybe a 7 or a 6, and then a 5, and a 4.5 million. I feel like they're all going to be, you're going to have that sort of the structure of a team, unless you want to go a big 5 across midfield, but then you're going to be sacrificing at the back. So these are all your different structures and tiers that you can be going for. Lads, before I move on to forwards, anything else on midfielders?
No, nothing to add on to that. I think it's good coverage.
Forwards. Haaland, 49.6% owned. Slap that across your faces. There are 5 million fantasy managers registered at the moment. 2.5 million of them are Haaland. I mean, that's a lot for a guy that's never played in the Premier League before, and Pep has never had a player really that's taken in the first season. It's a lot. Don't get me wrong, he's a beast, but we'll see what happens. I think
he'll score 20 goals. He'll score 20 goals.
Yeah, I completely agree. I just think they'll all be, bar 1 or 2 of them, from like game week 8 onwards.
Yeah,
when he settles in. Their fixtures are good though. Definitely could be wrong there. Harry Kane, 25.6%, seems relatively classic. I think it's one or the other, or neither. Player I really like, Mr. Vardy. Jamie Vardy. He's a player that seems to always get like slept on at the beginning of the year. But he got, in seasons before last season when he got a lot of injuries, 183, 174, 210, 187 points. Still got 133 last year. Delivered 2018, 23 and 15 goals. Just a good, solid player. Brentford, Arsenal, Southampton, Chelsea, Man United. Not the best fixtures in the world to start, but if you're looking for a differential up front, I like him. Darwin Núñez seems like he's potentially going to play now at 9 million. He is an option. And then Gabriel Jesus at 70.7% owned. You've underpriced him, FPL. Let's just put it that way. But 8 million quid. Is he not going to be in either of your teams?
He'll be in there. 100%. He was the first player I put in, even before I saw his pre-season. When the app first went live, it was Jesus straight, and it's just a no-brainer.
Scott?
Yeah, definitely in there, mate.
Yeah, 100%. It just is a no-brainer. 8 million Arsenal's fixtures. He's going to play every week.
Who else is going to play? That's the question.
That's what I mean. Like, it's just he's a no-brainer. So I think it's going to be either Kane or Haaland with Jesus. Then there's just a load of wait and sees. I don't want to spend ages on these because there's no point. There's so many ways. Who's going to catch fire out of these lot? There's loads of options. I think Alvarez at 6.5 is an interesting one to point out. He's incredibly cheap. If Ronaldo hopefully buggers off, then Martial's going to play through the middle for United, and the system seems to suit him quite nicely. You've got players like Watkins, Havertz, Calvert-Lewin, even like Bamford, Wilson. He's obviously a good player if you get on him for different periods of time. Mitrovic is too expensive at 6.5 for me, but he was always going to come in at that. Ivan Toney at 7's a bit disappointing. And Mbuemo's outperformed him in pre-season, even though it has to be said, Mbuemo scored 3 goals, Toney scored 1, but one of Mbuemo's goals was a penalty when Toney had just gone off the pitch. So if Toney had stayed on like 5 minutes longer, it would have been 2 each. So it would have looked very, very different. Solanke, his players just haven't ever done it in the Premier League. So it's difficult. There's a lot of 5.5s, all the Palace strikers. We don't know who's going to play, says FPL. Benfica, Eduardo and Mateta are all at 5.5. Undav people banged on about. I think when you're looking at 4.5s to fit in your team, slowly they're all being loaned out or sold. Delap's going to go as well, isn't he now? Interesting if he goes to a Prem team. Is it Southampton as an option, was it?
Yeah.
Interesting if he goes, because, Brozia's not going back, is he? So maybe an option. It could be a good 4.5 to stick in there, especially at Southampton. Greenwood at 25.5. You can tell why he got the most points out of any 4.5 million option.
He will also play this year with 5 subs. He will play. He's just about to sign a new contract, so
he'll get minutes, and that's why he's so highly owned. With a lot of early wild cards, these players just worry me a little bit, just in case they get, people sell them early and then the price drops a lot and you lose a lot of team value. because this year, sorry, more than any other, there's going to be more players starting game week 1 than ever before, and the prices are going to change even faster than they have done previously. So being on it with your transfers relatively early at the beginning of the season is worthwhile. You can end up having an extra $1 million in team value after 5 game weeks just by making transfers quickly. I like to have all the information, don't get me wrong, but I think I'd rather $1 million in the bank to spend more a little bit later on in the season, especially if I've got a bit of squad depth. Twitter poll on strikers: 78% of people went Kane, and 22% had neither Kane or Haaland. So none of our Twitter community and Instagram community have Haaland in their game at 1 team at the moment. I was quite surprised by. I thought we'd have somebody, but yeah, an absolute nobody. In terms of budget midfielders, Bailey was top, and then it was Neto and Podence. Well, actually, they were equal at 33%. And Rashford, Martinelli, all seem to be the more popular options of the 6.7 midfielders. So now's the time, lads. Now's the time to see what the self-proclaimed FPL guru has put in his team so far. I hope you're all really excited for this. I think I could
guess it now, to be honest.
You probably could, to be fair. I spent a long time on this.
Oh, wait, no, maybe not. There's one in there. I'm like, where's he come from?
Well, cash, probably, innit?
For value, though, I think he's like top 10 value players, isn't he?
I know. To be fair, him or Justin, it's an option. I don't really like 5 million midfielders, to be honest with you. I might just take him out and save the 0.5. But for podcast listeners, it's Edison, Trent, Cancelo, Cash and Robertson, Salah, Saka, Bailey and Neto, Kane and Jesus. And then on the bench, Ward, Nico Williams, Andreas Pereira and Lyle Taylor from Nottingham Forest.
That is a very budget bench.
Very budget bench. Incredibly budget bench. It's because I've gone premium keeper, 3 premium midfielders, and then 3 premium defenders, and then relatively expensive strike force. And then game week 1 of my team rating on Fantasy Football Hub's 97% now. 87% game week rating. And then I just did the change to Haaland captaincy for the next week. And then I'd bank a transfer into game week 3. And so that's the initial plan. Maybe Haaland, Kane out Haaland in game week 2 potentially, and then we roll from there. But that's the team I had. There's plenty of different options here. There's a lot, and we've got to pick our pod team, boys. We don't do that now because that'll take hours. But we've got to pick our pod team of who we want to go with. And I think collaborating on something like this at the beginning of the season in terms of team structure might be relatively difficult. 88% of people, by the way, went Mo Salah for captain game week 1 in our poll, and the other 12% went Spurs. I don't want to go Salah, but I'm going to end up going Salah. And it's disappointing because I think Kane's probably the better option. Maybe I'll go. I've still got Salah. At least he's not going to hurt me too much. Even if he gets a hat trick, it's only at 15 points minus whatever like Kane gets, or 18 points minus whatever like Kane gets. But we'll see, boys. Your captains game week 1. Your thoughts on that before we wrap up?
Don't know. I haven't done a team yet. Spurs.
Spurs. So Kane probably from our conversation we've just had. Do you thought?
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
Tom, give me anyone but Salah. Do you think you're going to maybe go somewhere else?
I've got it on Kane at the moment. So
I like it though. I think I might end up with Kane. It's Salah versus Kane for me in terms of that team.
I just think Spurs at home, like first day of the season, big crowd, loads of new signings. There might be quite a positive vibe there. And Kane in good form.
Talking about new positive vibes, look at that 2 p.m. kickoff and on Sunday, new manager, theatre of dreams. I think Bruno's going to shock the world. He's going to score 5.
I generally think we beat them, and I think we do a good job. I honestly do. Like, I don't think we'll score 5, but like I think we'll beat them. And I think Martial will put a lot of people, make people think, oh, maybe I should buy him at 7 million after that game. It's going to be one of them matches. I think. To wrap up before we go for a few of your predictions, right, about the season. Deadline is at 6:30 this coming Friday. 6:30 Friday. Palace play Arsenal. live on Sky Sports. Can't wait for the Premier League to be back. Early kickoffs, Fulham, Liverpool. And then there's a really interesting set of fixtures. I think a lot of these games will be great. And it wraps up on Super Sunday at 4:30. Man City play West Ham. And just so you know, for game week 2, there's a full week before game week 2, where the early kickoff is Villa against Everton. So the game week 2 deadline is at 11 o'clock on Saturday, the 13th of August. As for some predictions, people, we had a couple of people go, right, give us some thoughts. Who do you think is going to do well? Who do you think is going to do badly? So I want your top 7 in order in the Premier League, and I want your bottom 3. Who's going to go first?
I'll go first.
Go for it.
Cully's going to hit me, but I think Liverpool, City, Spurs, Arsenal, Chelsea, Man United, and Newcastle.
Okay. Bottom 3?
Bottom 3, Forest, Bournemouth. And I honestly don't know on this last one. I'm going to say, I think my gut says Brentford, even though they were really good last year. Everyone struggles with second season. I just think Brentford might struggle again.
So is that Forest 20th?
Bournemouth 20th. Bournemouth 20th.
Okay.
Bournemouth 20th, Forest 19th, Brentford 18th.
Okay. Scotty?
City, Liverpool,
Yeah.
Spurs,
Mm-hmm.
Man United,
Yeah.
Chelsea, Arsenal,
Mm.
West Ham. No, Leicester.
Leicester.
Yeah, no Europe for him this year. Leicester 7th.
Bottom 3?
Forest bottom.
Mm-hmm.
Bournemouth second bottom.
Yeah.
Southampton third bottom.
Ooh.
I like that as a difference. Unfortunately, I think City will win the league, which is annoying. I think Liverpool will come second. I hate my life. It's just not for being a United fan. It's for a moment in time. Bad time we had a bad run to it. And I think Spurs third as well. Completely agree. And I think United fourth. Only because I'm biased. So I think we'll come fourth. I actually think Arsenal will come fifth. I think Chelsea will come sixth. And I think Tuchel will be sacked by Christmas, by the World Cup, personally. And then Leicester will come seventh. I completely agree with that. Scott? And then bottom 3, I think it'll be Bournemouth bottom. I think it'll be Brentford 19th. And I think it'll be Southampton 18th. And I think we'll have a Fulham and Forest stay up. Why the hell not?
The only reason I've not got Fulham in that bottom 3 is surely they just get a season. You know, it's like Norwich eventually have to have back-to-back seasons in the Premier League.
They've got a really, really good manager for me.
Yeah.
Oh, makes a big difference. Players, FPL players. I mean, let's. Who do you think is going to be the top scoring FPL assets? Top 3.
Salah 1.
Yeah, Salah 1. Boring. Yeah, but it's true, isn't it?
Salah, Son, Kane.
Salah, Son, Kane.
I'm going to say Salah, Kane, and KDB.
I went Salah, KDB, Kane. That was the 3 I went in. So I swapped the order for you.
What, Paul Son? What's he done?
I think Son will be right there up with them. I just think if KDB can just not have glass ankles for a year, and he's got Haaland to feed the ball into, I just think
mate, Son's crying.
And I think the value. I think we're going to see some incredible value from Man United this season. Personally, I think we're going to see some great value from those guys.
We all hope not.
Absolutely, you two, but Scott doesn't care actually. So yeah, that's it. You hope not, I hope so. And yeah, I think this season is going to be very interesting about who are going to be the budget players to pick up on. So lads, thanks very much for getting through that. There's probably some technical difficulties somewhere through this, and there'll probably be a few glitches when we're putting this together. So thanks for bearing with us. I have no idea how long it is anymore because I lost track for obvious reasons because we had loads of technical difficulties. But thank you ever so much for every single person who's tuned in. Thank you ever so much for every single person that's contributed to this podcast. Thank you ever so much for every single person that's joined our fantasy league. Don't forget, the code is LXAYMI. That's LXAYMI. And that is on our social media platforms. So you can find it there anyway. All in Football Pod, All in Football P, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Tom, Scott, good luck. We'll have a nice chat about our draft teams put together for the pod team. That'll take us a while. I'm looking forward to it, and we will hopefully speak to you after Game Week 1 deadline between Game Week 1 and Game Week 2. Thank you very much.
Thanks for ruining my week, Alex, by making this all I think about. Thanks.
I tried, honestly. I've held off doing this podcast for so long. I wanted to at least be August before I did it, because I know so many of us, we love it. We love our FPL. We love our football. I wanted us to at least be able to, have a bit of time off, enjoy the Euros, do whatever. So I've held off as long as I could do, Tom. I've done, and I did it mostly.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that.
You. So thank you very much for tuning in, everybody, and bye for now.